So I welcome to the stage Rebecca Serle. Come on out. So fun. She jumps off the page and into real life. So cute.
I'm so happy to be
There you have a mic and another water.
Another water.
Here, take the mic.
Okay, hold on.
Here, we'll juggle the...
I was like carrying like 7,000 things these days.
Including a baby.
Including a baby. Hi.
So Rebecca is an amazing author and a really cool woman and a soon-to-be mommy for the first time.
No.
And so it's just such a cool, one of those fun manifestations. I just was saying to her that like, I got so much personal pleasure from your creativity. I really felt like I was transported to a whole nother world. And so thank you for writing those books.
Oh my God. Thank you for being so kind. And she's such a master. By the way, I want to preview really quickly by saying that like, I'm 6 months pregnant. I forget a lot of words, even though I'm a writer. So if I'm saying something and you're like, this makes no sense, it doesn't make any sense. And I apologize in advance. But you are such a master manifester and you are such a champion of women and just like women coming in contact with each other. And I feel so loved by you, honestly, even though we like are very new friends.
You're so easy to love. So easy to love. And she came to my house and I was just like, oh, just love her. So let's dive in, shall we? Okay. So let's just kind of go through the looking glass on the journey. So when did it hit you like, I think I'm going to be a writer?
I always say I'm really lucky that this worked out because I have no other discernible talents. Like from the jump, as soon as I remember reading, I remember yes, like chapter books when I was younger, but I remember reading Wuthering Heights in probably like the 5th grade.
That's not a thing. People don't read that in 5th grade. Why is she so much smarter than me?
But I remember thinking like, oh my God, people put words together on a page in such a way that makes you feel. I want to do that. Like, I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. And so I was like entering little writing competitions when I was in elementary school. And it just was always what I wanted to do. But I didn't really know that real people were authors. I didn't know what that meant. To be an author.
Did you go to college for writing and think you were going to be a writer?
I went to college for creative writing. I majored in creative writing and English. I went to USC and I thought, okay, I'm going to move to New York. And I'll work in magazines or I'll work. I just wanted to get close to the words because I didn't really know that you could write them. I just wanted to be close to them. So I ended up moving to New York and I got a job as an editorial assistant at Penguin, the publishing house. And I also started interning at a literary agency. And I would just read the slush pile, which means like all of the submissions that come in that don't have an agent representing them. I would just read through them and see what hit. And then I slowly, between those two things, I started to understand, okay, what an author is and what an agent is and what a publisher is and an editor, and all of these different pieces came together. And then I was very lucky in that like I knew some of the players at that point. So when I finished my first novel, I was able to submit it to an agent that I knew. And that was
so cool how you decided to like go as like Mossad, like on the inside and like study like how this worked.
But I think that that's so, I think
it's smart.
I think it's a lot of it. I mean, I think you have to really like know the space that you want to occupy. And writing is a big part of being a novelist, but publishing is another really big part of it. And I really wanted to understand how this industry that I'm now a part of, how it works.
It's so interesting. Bobby Brown, another woman founder.
I like that you're putting me in the same sentence as Bobby Brown. It's like, yeah, Rebecca Serle and Bobby Brown.
Yeah, same. We both have like basically the same glasses.
That is true. That is true.
But she did that too. Like as a makeup artist, she said she was studying all that was out there.
Yeah.
And just sort of trying to see like what was missing from the market.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to just throwing paint at the wall. She was like really doing the rounds and looking at what wasn't there that she maybe could add to the conversation.
I believe in that. I don't think that you can write to the market. In other words, I would never suggest anybody sit down and think about like, oh, there hasn't been, this is a dumb example, but forgive my brain, like a vampire book in a while or whatever. I would never suggest that you try to write to trends or write to the market. But I think writing with an awareness of it is like infinitely different than writing in a vacuum. And I always say, people say, oh, you shouldn't write for an audience. Like, am I allowed to swear here?
Yeah.
I think that's bullshit. I write to experience a dialogue with you. I write because I want people to read what I write. I want you to feel something. I want to be able to share a conversation with you. Like, that's what's interesting.
Before you were an author, a published author, who were a few of your favorites? Like, who inspired you?
Oh my goodness. So many. Like I said, like Wuthering Heights, Catcher in the Rye, like those were the two books I can remember from high school reading and being like, oh my God, I wanted to study how people, put words together. And then I really, like, I got into fantasy for a while and I loved like the Harry Potter series. I loved, the way somebody can like really build this world that readers can play in and can occupy. And that became really exciting to me. And now I'm lucky to have so many author friends. There's so many contemporaries that I love that I like wait for their next books. And I really love the space that I write in now. Like I love women's fiction.
It's my favorite. It's so good.
Women's fiction.
Yeah, it's
so
the best.
Silly, but
it's really the best. Like Jennifer Weiner has been on our show.
Yeah.
That was the first time, in the early 2000s, I was reading books.
Reading Good and Bad in like 2000 and whatever it was and being like, whoa,
yeah,
you can say this, you can be this honest.
Yeah. I haven't felt that whoa since her till I read your work. And I was like, oh, this is smart and interesting. And women are multidimensional and I love them and I want to know them and be friends with them. I feel like you both do that so well. Ira Glass, I think we're all familiar with this particular piece of his where he talks about taste, right?
Yeah.
He talks about how when you're starting out, you have good taste, but you don't yet create the kind of thing that would make it to the grade of your taste, right? And that he says the people who wind up sort of going the distance keep creating until the work they create matches what they can point to as having great taste. And so I think that is so important for creatives to keep in mind, that if you look back at like early Picasso, it doesn't even look like Picasso. Like he was basically just imitating other things of the time. And then he found his own voice, so to speak. So can you sort of share when you were first writing, like looking back, did you have sort of that moment where you're like, I'm going to give up, or I'm not getting the recognition that I was hoping to get? And then you sort of found your way to that moment where you found your voice and you started realizing, oh no, this is getting a different response. Like, tell us about that journey, that creative journey.
Well, I think in the beginning, I think a lot of writers, particularly if you start off young, you start off really just like imitating other work that you like. And so my first like few pieces, I won't say novels, but were really sort of imitations of other work that I really enjoyed. And then the first book that was published was a book called When You Were Mine, which was a modern retelling of Romeo and Juliet from Rosalind's point of view. They made a movie on it called Rosalind that came out in 2022 on Hulu that I don't really think anybody saw.
But just casual. They just made a movie about it. No big deal.
You thought it was really cute. It was very cute.
That's amazing.
But I remember writing that book. I was 22. I was experiencing my first like really major heartbreak. And that book was a young adult novel. My first 4 novels were. I felt very close to the teen experience. Like that's what I was going through. And so as I've grown, and then I entered my 20s and then I entered my 30s, I found myself wanting to talk about different things. And I think for me, the authenticity has really come from getting to explore and express what it is that I'm wrestling with and dealing with in my own life, and getting to like externalize that. And I think like if you look at my work, it really is like it's really like, it's like my life. Like it started as a teenager and it evolved and it grew. And, The Dinner List was my first adult novel, which always sounds like porn, but just means it's a book for grownups. Every time I say adult novel, I'm like,
bow chicka bow bow.
Right. But, it was really about like looking back on my 20s and the relationships that I'd had and sort of how I felt about New York at that time. And then In 5 Years was the book that really changed my life. It was the first book that anyone ever read really widely. It brought people back to what we call my backlist, the books that came before it. And it's interesting because I remember writing that book and I remember that it came out really clean, which is always how I know that a draft is working. I think a lot of authors, they come up with a first draft and then they need to like edit away or add or like, you have to find the story in it. For me, it's like if it's there, the first draft, it's good. If it's not there, it's not. And so there are many books that are on my computer that hopefully will never see the light of day because they just don't have it. But there was something that just came out that was really pure about that book. It was like, and I feel like I can share this here. I feel like this is something that your audience will relate to. Like when I write, it really feels like a dialogue between me and whatever source is, whatever you want to call that. It's different for all of us. It feels a little bit like channeling, and In 5 Years was when I really hit that stride. It didn't feel like effort. It didn't feel like I was building something. Stephen King has a really great metaphor where he says, a good novel is not a house that you build. It's a sculpture that needs to be revealed. It's already there, and your job is to get rid of the excess clay. And that's how I felt about In 5 Years. I felt like this book existed, and it was my job to just uncover it. And that changed how I write because that's the place that I write from now. I have no idea whether I answered your question or not.
Did. My God, I loved In 5 Years and I couldn't put it down. And it was such a page turner. And I love that you do that in your books. And I'm not surprised now that you're like, oh, I love fantasy. Not that your books are like that, but in a way they are because it's like we all saw Dead to Me, right? Dead to Me was just so good. And as funny as it was, it also like kept you on the edge of your seat. Mm-hmm. And I feel like your books are poignant, but I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know how
thrillers for people who don't like murder.
It's so good. I don't know how you do that. But
I don't like murder.
But literally, how do you do that? Like, I feel like every one of us has had the experience of that intimidating cursor on the screen that's just blinking. Like, I don't really get it. Like, for me, writing a book is starting with transcripts of podcasts, okay? And Seth Godin said to me, like, people get writer's block, but they don't get talker's block. So I'm like, lucky me, I just transcribe first what I cannot imagine having to sit down and write a story that just flows like that for 250 pages. How do you actually do that? Do you like go away to the woods for like 6 months? Do you go to Walden Pond? Like, what are you doing?
I tend to write books very quickly. I'll write a novel in like 3 months because I always say it helps to stay in step with the character. Like I don't like to break away and come back in and break away and come back in because I also think it interrupts this connection. Like it is a little bit of a download. And so you want to stay in it. You want to stay close to it. So I tend to draft a book quickly. I'll write like 2,000 words a day until it's done. I'm sure that a lot of mothers in here are looking at me like, good luck, honey. I feel like after this baby comes, I don't really know how my process is going to change, but I have to say I think that's part of a creative life. Like meeting my husband changed my process. Getting married changed my process. Getting pregnant has certainly changed my process. I've been like so sick for 6 months. And so my hope is that my process will keep evolving. And I feel like I trust writing now. It sounds really hokey to say, but I think when I was starting off, I always felt like every book I wrote would be the last book and that writing would somehow leave me or abandon me. And there was like, I had to like keep at it. I had to like keep engaging in the conversation in order for writing to meet me. And I've let that go. I don't really feel that way anymore. I know that writing will return. And so the way I start off is I have a conceit. Like we'll take One Italian Summer. Like, what if you could know your mom when your mom was your age? Like, what if you could spend the summer with your mother as a young woman?
You have to read this book. Oh my God.
That's so nice. And then I will spend some time just kind of like meditating on that idea, like who best to tell that story, like what's the character that I think can convey the message I really want to say the most. And then like, where does the story take place? Like how important is setting? That in particular, One Italian Summer takes place in Italy. So setting is very important. And then I'll kind of make like a really rough beat sheet of maybe like 20 plot points that I think I have to hit. I never really know what the ending is going to be. There's always a twist in the book that surprises me. And I always say that my favorite part about writing is when it feels like reading, when I also am waiting to discover what's going to come next and how the story is going to turn out. And that happens. It really does happen. And so that's why I don't like to plot too tightly, because then I feel like I stifle out some of the magic.
By the way, I don't want to give it away, so I'll just give a sort of headline, but I was so impressed with how you ended One Italian Summer, because I think part of me thought it was going to end the other way. And then I was like, good for her, like for the character, that she found more there and grew. Like so good. Do you think, because you were just talking about channeling, which I totally get, like, I think creativity is flow state, right? When you're not controlling it, it just is, something's writing through you, right? But then the question is, do you think, like Julia Cameron in The Artist Way kind of makes this declaration that everyone is creative? But what if a person hasn't experienced that flow state and therefore doesn't know like that they can access that? Do you think you can teach someone to be a great writer? Do you think everyone has a great story in them? Or do you think not necessarily, but that they could, find flow state in some creativity?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I do think everyone has the ability to be a creative and to experience flow state. I don't think that everyone has the ability to be a writer, nor the desire to be one. Yeah. Because I think that my old mentor used to say to me that writing is 10% talent and 90% temperament. And I really think that's true. Like, you have to really enjoy sitting alone in a room, staring at that cursor, as you said, and just kind of pulling, from the letters in the English language and organizing them on a page. It's not for everybody. And I think that this is controversial. I think you can learn how to be, I think you have to be good as a writer. I think you can learn how to be great. But I think that I think something has to be there, and I'm not necessarily saying it's talent. I think a lot of it is just temperament, commitment, something else. But I do think that everyone has the ability to be creative. I experience so much, the other thing about me is I don't write all of the time. So a lot of writers will say you have to write every day, you have to write every day. And I think that that's very valuable if you're starting off in writing. If you want to, build a novel for the first time, you have a project you're trying to tackle. I do think having that commitment and sitting down and writing every day. But for me, there's a lot of writing that has nothing to do with writing. There's a lot of writing that's just about living. And so there's a lot of my year that I'm not writing, and I'm certainly experiencing creativity and flow state in that, whatever it is, decorating a house, or, for me, now, kind of daydreaming about this baby and making her nursery really sweet or whatever, all of that is creativity. All of that is tapping into something. And so then when I sit down, hopefully this summer, to write my next novel, I pull all of that creativity in, and then it becomes writing, but it doesn't have to start off that way.
When you said write your next novel, it's uncanny to me that there's ever a person. I mean, when you think of someone like Paul McCartney or Alan Menken, we went to the Hollywood Bowl to hear Alan Menken, and he played A Whole New World, and we were like, okay, Dayenu, that'd be enough, right? Yeah. And then he plays the next song and the next song and the next. You're like, how on earth did all of these songs come out of one person, right?
Did you see Joni Mitchell at the bowl?
I didn't get to go.
I didn't get to go either. Did anybody go? No. Oh my gosh. I know, sad. Me neither.
There's no word yet for her.
No.
What that is and who she is. But another great example, A Case of You. If she just wrote A Case of You, we'd be done. We'd get it. But no, she wrote all of Blue and everything else.
Yeah.
when you just said, I'm going to write that next book, is that because you have like a 10-book deal with a publisher and you have to, or because you just know if you get into a certain state, the next book is going to just keep coming and you welcome that? Or do you feel it's because there's pressure now to have to perform and write 10 new books?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I certainly have a contract. There are people that I owe, books to, but also I really love it. Like, this is how I want to spend my life. I want to spend my life
That's
writing.
So beautiful.
And, and I always say, I think as writers, there's a lot of narrative around the hardship of writing. Like, oh, writing is like cutting your veins open and like bleeding on a page. Like, we hear this.
It's not
like,
great.
It's like there's very bad PR.
Bad PR.
For me, I think the most valuable thing that I have ever done in my writing practice is to cultivate a narrative of love around it. Like, to tell myself how lucky I am to do it and how much I love it. And that narrative makes it so. That's how I talk about it with my friends. It's how I talk about it with my agent. It's how I talk about it with my husband. It's how I talk about it with my publisher. And so when I'm then sitting down to do it, that's the story I bring. Like, that's the story I bring to my desk and bring to that new book. And then I am excited. So I love it. And as long as my fingers work and anybody wants to read, I'll keep doing it.
What is it like for you to travel to different book signings and meet your fans? Like, it must be, because there's a lot of love for you in the world.
It's really special. So I have to say, I published for a long time. I published for 10 years before In 5 Years came out. And then In 5 Years came out at such a strange time. It came out March 10th of 2020.
Ooh. That's like literally the beginning.
It was wild. I was meant to be on like a 13-city book tour, and I made it to the second stop, and they were like, you can have the penthouse. There's no one else in this hotel. And I'm crying. And, and this was like the book. This was the book. It was like, I had gone and filmed Good Morning America. I had never been on morning television before. Like, there were all these things that we got for this book that I thought were just going to disappear overnight because of COVID. And then this really remarkable thing happened, which is that like people started reading it and started sharing it, and it kind of blew up. But in that time, I didn't tour. I knew that people were reading it. I saw the numbers, but it wasn't real. I had never seen the book out in person. And so then when I went out to tour for One Italian Summer, which was the spring of 22, that was a really special tour, because that was the first one where we got to talk about One Italian Summer, but we also got to talk about In 5 Years. And I got to like actually see people in real life who had read this book and who had shared this book and who had, made it what it was over that pandemic. And so that was really exciting. And I love it. People are so tender and sweet. And, I write stories they're very personal to me, but they, I think like people take them and they feel personal to other people. And so people share stories of their mothers with me. People share stories of their mothers passing. Within 5 years, people share stories of their best friends. And there's a lot of really beautiful stuff in there. There's a lot of really hard stuff in there. And I feel very lucky to get to bear witness to it. So it's really special.
It's beautiful. I have a friend who, and I've shared this on the podcast because I love this quote of hers, but she's a screenwriter, but similarly in the writing space. And she said that if you want to make someone hate a character, make them perfect.
Yeah.
And if you want to make the audience root for a character, make them flawed. Yes. And I think you do a really good job of that. And I'm curious if you agree with that. And if so, do you have that in mind when you're writing these characters?
I think that's really true. I don't know if I've ever thought about it in terms of if you want people to not like a character. I just like, there's nothing interesting to me about writing a perfect narrator. Like, why would that be compelling for me? Forget for you, but like, why would that be compelling for me to write? And a lot of my readers, there seems to be a theme in my books. My poor husband. There seems to be a theme in my books that like there's a lot of infidelity. Like, I don't know, it just comes up. It just comes
What are you trying to say, Rebecca?
Right. I said before we got married, I told my husband, I was like, honey, I need you to understand something, okay? I'm going to keep writing. And you know what doesn't make a good novel? A happy marriage. No one wants to read about that. It's not interesting. But Where was I?
Yeah.
Oh, right. The infidelity. People, I don't know. They have a hard time with this, which I think is interesting. For me, it's like, I don't write, yes, there's an element of magical realism in my books, but I don't write fantasy. So there's only so many stories you can tell that have some kind of romantic element, as adults. Inevitably, perhaps if they're in a relationship, like some other element's going to come into play. It seems pretty natural that should happen in these books, but people have a hard time with it. And I always say that, like, it's not interesting to write about perfect women at all. It's interesting to write about women who are wrestling with like the specific circumstance of their life and that learn something. I certainly don't feel like I'm the morality police in my books. I think if I were, they wouldn't be very, very interesting or good.
Yeah. Well, there's so much beauty in all of it. Because I think there's so much, as that song in Garden State says, there's beauty in the breakdown.
Oh, yeah, that song.
He's about to do a whole show with the music from Garden State, Zach Braff.
Oh,
at
really?
At the Greek Theater. It's gonna be so good.
Amazing.
But that character arc in your books, like, I love that in One Italian Summer, she gets to really see her mom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so beautiful, because those of us who are moms become moms. It's like we then look back and can have some compassion for our moms. That, like, they're also just people, like, doing the very best that they can.
Can I tell the story of how that book came to be?
Yeah. I for sure thought that was about you and your mom. And then I'm like, oh, your mom's alive. Thank God. Yeah. I don't get it.
My mom's here. Thank God.
Yeah.
But so in the summer of 2019, so One Italian Summer is about a woman who gets to like spend the summer with her mother as a young woman. They spend the summer in Positano, Italy. And in 2019, I went to Italy with my mom. I went to Rome, which was this place that had always like meant a lot to her. My mom had always talked about Rome. She fell in love with this man named Remo when she was 20 years old there. And we found Remo. What? Yeah. Yeah, we found Remo on Facebook. And they met at the Trevi Fountain, which is the place that they had met. I'm not going to age her, but a lot of decades beforehand. He was very handsome. And he brought her this silver love charm that she had given him, like all of those summers ago, that he had kept. By the way, my mom is very happily married to my father, and this was all sanctioned by him. I like went on this whole book tour, and I was like talking about her and Raymond. My mom was like, "You might want to mention your dad." But he brought her this silver love charm, and we sat in a coffee shop. He didn't speak very good English, so we had like Google Translate on the phone, and I was watching my mom. And she was like kind of nervous and sort of flirty. And like before we had gone out, she had asked me like, does this skirt look good? Like my mom is a very typical, like, like strong Jewish mother. Like I've never seen her that way. And I really I felt like I was sitting there with like the young girl inside of her, this woman that wasn't my mother. And I started to think about like, what would it be like? Like I had these few hours with her, and it was so special. And what would it be like to get to like actually spend the summer with that person? Because I think that also I think part of the process of becoming an adult is realizing that your parents don't have the answers, just like you don't. Like we're all doing the best that we can. And anyway, that's a little bit about how that book came to be.
That's really cool to hear. What's the origin story of how In 5 Years came to be?
In 5 years, that's a good question. What is the origin story? Oh, In 5 Years has actually a crazy origin story.
She forgot it a second ago.
I did.
It's actually like, oh yeah, it's really good. I just got it.
Yeah. Okay. So like,
you're making this up.
No, I'm not. No, this is pretty wild, but I don't know. You're gonna have to go with me a little bit here. So about 8 years ago, or maybe it was like 7 years at the time that I wrote it, I had this reading with this medium, and she told me.
Keep talking.
Yeah, and she told me like exactly who my future husband would be, what his name was, what his job was, how we would meet, like all these things.
What's her number? Come on, get it out.
Her name's Rebecca Rosen, and she's amazing, but her wait list is very long.
Her and we talked about that. Yes, I had a session with her.
No way.
Yes,
I
know. We'll go deep
she's
dive.
Incredible.
Yeah, I told.
Okay, so
You're the one who introduced me to her.
I did. It's the baby's fault. Blame the baby. I don't remember anything anymore. So okay,
she told you who you were going to marry.
Right. So she told me so right before I started this book, which was, I don't know, 2018, I met this person, and he was exactly who she said, same name. We met in the exact same circumstance, the time she said, everything, except for there was one thing that was just off. Like the timing was off. And
what does that
I
mean?
was like, okay, should I just say? So
what else is there?
So we get together, and he's a person who sort of worked in the industry. I don't know if he does anymore, but he worked in the industry that I was in. And so we had been set up by these two different people, and she said it's going to kind of be like a work setup, but whatever. Anyway, we're 2 hours into this meeting/date, and he says, I wasn't sure if this was a date or if it was a meeting, and I really wanted to meet you. I have to tell you that I got back together with my ex-girlfriend last night. And I was like, what? But we're going to get married. I didn't understand. It was crazy.
Did you say that? Because that's awkward.
No.
Okay.
No, but I did it to all my girlfriends. I was like, this is bullshit. So then this year ensued where they the timing kept not working out, and I would email Rebecca being like, what is this? And then inevitably he met somebody else and I met somebody else, and that was kind of that. But it really got me thinking about this idea. What if we could see the future? Even if we can see the future, we still cannot see what it will mean. And I really just loved that idea. And that idea is the thesis for the entirety of In 5 Years. This woman wakes up in an apartment she's never been before with a man she's never met before, and she spends 1 hour 5 years in the future. And then wakes back up in her normal life, and 4.5 years go by, and then she meets the man who was in that vision with her.
It's so good.
And the book is entirely about that. The book is about, she saw it, she lived that hour, but when she actually gets there, everything looks different than what she thought because of everything that led to it.
Wait, but Rebecca Rosen was wrong about who you were going to marry?
No, but then I had another session, and then she predicted my actual husband, so it's all good.
So I have to have a second call.
And he's like, oh my God, you're crazy.
But wait, so what did she say about the first one?
No, you know what she did say, in all honesty?
Let's call her, put her on speaker.
I know. In all honesty, what she did say was, fate is not a one path solidified thing. And I think this is really important. We have directions that we tend towards, but we all have a few different paths that our life could end up. And by the way, a few different people that we could end up with. And she said that. She said, I see 3 different soulmates for you. So I'm on number 2. We'll see what they are. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. I know. I would die without my husband. He's the best thing ever. But
you guys are so cute together. I love that she just took a trip to New York and for the new book. And of course, in every story, you're like, he had to come with me to make sure I was okay. And you're like, and he was right. I'm pregnant and I need the help.
And I really wanted to go to New York because I was I lived there for 12 years. It was I spent my whole, really my whole single life there. And I was like, oh, this is my last trip. I had to go for work. And I was like, this is my last trip before I become a mom. And I want to see my friends. I want to do my thing. And he's like, I'm coming. And I'm like, no, you're not. This is a me thing. And then he's like, no, I'm coming. And he was totally right.
Yeah.
Life's different now.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
So Expiration Dates is her new book. And it's great. So tell us a little bit about that origin story.
Expiration Dates is about a woman, Daphne Bell, who every time she meets a man, she receives a slip of paper with his name and a number on it. And that number is the exact amount of time that they'll be together. So I, for a really long time, wanted to write about the search for love. But I didn't really know what it was that I was trying to say. Was it that everything I thought I was looking for wasn't actually meant for me, and I had to like let go of my vision of what love was in order to find the thing that I was meant for? Was it like, no, keep going, everything you think you're meant for, you are? Like, I didn't know. And so, but I really wanted to write this book for a long time. And I remember writing my editor and telling her about the book. I was like, I have this idea. It's about this woman who gets these slips of paper, and it's really about the search for love. It's about all of these different relationships and kind of like how you find meaning and how you find kind of the quote unquote ending that is like meant for you. And I said, like, I think if I write it honest, he'll be there at the end of it. And I ended up meeting my husband like 6 weeks after I finished the book, because I think that for so long, I was waiting to write this book until I knew what the answer was. And finally I was like, I'm going to swear again. I was like, fuck it. I want to tell this story, and I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I want to tell it. And I kind of like wrote my way to him in a way in that book. And everybody says he's like one of the characters in the book, which is really kind of sweet. And it has a lot, like, it just has a lot of, I think, what it means to be single, what it means to be single in your 20s. I think probably more specifically what it means to be single in your 30s. And I just had a lot to say that I wanted to put somewhere. So I'm very excited that this book exists. It was a long time coming.
So fun. And those of you who are buying 5 books of mine and get the VIP bag, she signed some copies and they're in that bag in case you want that too. Just why not make his up in the ante on a sell the book. Speaking of selling books and speaking of publishing, raise your hand if you ever would like to write and publish a book, if that's something that feels, that's so cool. I love that.
Amazing.
That's really cool. Well, I know a lot of you have your own platforms and some of you have podcasts. And so it makes sense that you might also want to write a book. So let's talk from that sort of vantage point. Tell us a few things, like, what does it take to get a publishing deal? What does it take to have a book that like they feel like is actually going to go the distance and you can see it go to market and maybe sell a few copies?
I think that I don't know. I mean, you are far more the expert in that area than I am. Like, I don't know about the nonfiction space that well. Like, I think the nonfiction and fiction markets are just really different beasts and animals. Like the way you sell things, I think in nonfiction, it's off a proposal. It's really about kind of like a platform.
Oh, wait, you don't do a book proposal?
No.
Huh.
Well,
you know, I'm like, I would not know that.
Actually, this is important to say. If anybody out there wants to write a fiction novel, I would always, like 10 times out of 10, say, write the whole book. Do not sell it on proposal. Like, it is so important that publishers and editors see the entirety of the story. I think they get more excited. I think like that's when you get into things like auctions. Like, I just think it's a way better model. Everything that I've sold up until probably like 5 or 6 years ago, I sold like a full-length manuscript. In 5 years was a full-length manuscript. The dinner list was a full-length manuscript. Now, because I have an ongoing relationship with my publisher, they just kind of like buy whatever the next books are, and then we talk about them when that contract comes up. But I would always encourage anyone to write a full manuscript in fiction. Nonfiction is different. It used to be, I mean, things are so different now. I think when I was starting off, it was like, like networking, like being in New York, I think was such a huge part of it, particularly for fiction. I always tell people to look in the backs of books that seem similar to theirs, that are like, and then see who the agent is, because the agent, if the agent is good, they will be thanked as number 1 in the book. And then look that agent up, see what their submission guidelines are, and follow them. I know a lot of people who have gotten published that way from submitting through those channels. I think like with fiction, it's just really hard to say. I mean, I think that everybody now likes somebody who has some kind of quote unquote platform. But also, like, I think when it comes to fiction, that's kind of BS. Like, if the story's there and it's amazing, then who cares? And I think publishers feel that way also. But this is really not helpful. Was the looking back of the book thing any helpful?
I think it's helpful.
And then I think like a lot of like my agent will do this sometimes too. There are different seminars that agents will run, like different writers workshops. I think that the not the Writers Guild, I'm blanking on what the association is in publishing, runs them a few times a year. I think there's one that's here. I know there's one in Kauai. There's like one. There are ones that are all over the place, and agents will go, and you have an opportunity to like talk to them about your work. So I think that can be really valuable too. I have a friend who actually just got an agent off of a conference.
Yeah, that's really cool. In my scenario, just because it's kind of cool. Do you know Libby McGuire?
Libby's my publisher.
God, that's so
Yes, Libby's my publisher.
Okay, so Libby's
the best.
The best.
Libby is the best. Libby should be president. Libby is like
she's right there. She's
Libby,
almost
like in COVID when I was telling you the book In 5 Years came out. We all went to dinner that night, and I'm like sobbing in the booth, and it's like everybody. It's like my editor and the publicist and everybody. And Libby just like announces his table. She just goes, "There's a lot going on." Like that's so Libby. Like her hand just doesn't shake. Wait, that's crazy.
That's crazy. Okay, so there was a season where she left publishing for a minute and she went to Gernert Group as an agent. Do you remember this?
No, I didn't know her then.
So she was on the subway and she was listening to my podcast used to be called Don't Keep Your Day Job. P.S. We're like remastering it and I'm going to soon have 2 podcasts, my old podcast and my new podcast. Anyways, but she was listening to my podcast, Don't Keep Your Day Job, because she was in the midst of, and she wrote to me and said, it was my 3rd episode. And she's like, this is a book and I want to help you sell it. And I was like, okay, who are you? You know? And then turned out she was like a big deal. And she was my agent and she got me my deal at Macmillan, St. Martin's Press. And then I was on the hook to do a second book with them. I didn't necessarily want to stay there. And my agent, Joe Veltri, I don't know if you know Joe, he's like the nicest guy, but he said, I think we could leave Macmillan and why don't you pitch it to Simon? And Libby's the big fish there. And she's like, Cathy, you're home. This is so full circle.
That is so wild.
But again, I'm telling you, my life is literally one synchronicity after another. My whole thing is like, if you just focus on what you can control, which is being the bubbliest, most happy, most in love with your life version of yourself, I'm telling you, it works out better. I could never have like back of the math pencil to paper figured out how I would meet Libby. I never. But she came to me. Right. And again, by putting myself out there and starting a podcast in my closet, if you would have told me, oh, 3 episodes in, Libby McGuire is going to listen to you on the subway and call you like, but that's the beauty. It's so much more fun when it's a surprise and you're like, I didn't see that coming. It's just, life is, I always say the universe is not net neutral, it's net positive.
I love that.
And it's just better than, there's like little Easter eggs in every corner. It's just so much fun.
And what is that? Is that just like, is it like, I say it's follow the feeling, you know, like what feels good, move into.
Yeah, because
everyone here is like,
I'm the kind of person that like, I don't want to do something for an outcome. I want the outcome to be this moment. I want to have fun with you right now on stage. I want to enjoy it. I'm not thinking about what's going to happen from this thing or what. I just want to enjoy every moment. So when you're enjoying every moment, you're already happy. You're already whole. You're already feeling great. And then of course, stuff happens.
I also have to say, like, and I know maybe this is a little cliche to say, but I look back over my career and the doors that close, I could get down on my knees and like thank those people that I cursed that door closed, because I would never,
God, it's so true.
ever in my wildest dreams, like I would never have the career and the life that I have today had the doors that I wanted to open.
Can you tell us one without naming names?
Yeah. I mean, I had, so when we went to, I had written the entirety of In 5 Years, and I had an existing publisher. I changed publishers from the Dinner List to In 5 Years, and I gave In 5 Years to my publisher, and the Dinner List had done nicely, but not like super well. And they just didn't get In 5 Years. And it's hard when you're a novelist who hasn't like fully hit it yet. Like I wasn't a New York Times bestseller yet. I didn't have like the sales track. I didn't have like the numbers behind me. It's hard to say no to a deal because you want to keep publishing. You want to keep writing. And they offered me a deal for In 5 Years, and I could tell that it was just not, they didn't get it. Like they didn't get it. Like nothing was going to happen there. and we fought to try to get it up. Like we fought to try to make it match the dinner list. Like we fought for them to like really kind of try to get the book. And ultimately I said to my team, I'm like, we have to walk away. And they're like, are you sure? Like nobody else may buy this book. And of course we took it out, and it was like the biggest auction I've ever had. Like so many editors came to the table and wanted to buy it. And then I ended up, with Libby, who's made me like the most amazing home any author could have. But like, I so desperately wanted it to work out with that other publisher. Like I so desperately wanted it to be a yes in that moment. And had it been, it would have died on the vine. Like this big version of my career didn't exist there. Do you know what I mean? Like had I walked through that door, I wouldn't have this.
It's almost exactly what happened, because my second book was going to be at Macmillan, and my editor, although she was so nice, lovely person, so not woo. She grew up in Siberia. Okay. Like it's
different.
But like, she's just like, she's very like analytical. And so she wanted my second book to be a business how-to book. And I was trying to shrink myself. And she kept saying to me things like, don't talk about synchronicity. And I was like, I couldn't breathe. I was just like, I don't want to write this book, but they kept telling me I had to write it, and I'd already signed the deal. And like, I just trusted my alignment. I was like, so then I won't publish a book right now, or I won't whatever. And next thing I know, Libby's like, you can come home. You can come to me. I'm at a different place. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. We'll have to take a selfie and send her.
We have to. I love that.
You mentioned the New York Times list. So I mentioned Seth Godin earlier. He's like such a mentor to me. And he's like, Kath, step away from the list. Stop it. Don't do that to yourself. But isn't it the cost of doing business? Like, don't you kind of need to be on that list? Like, what's your take on bestseller lists?
Well, I mean, every time a hardcover comes out, I freak out. I'm like, everyone's gonna hate it. Like, no one's gonna buy it. It's gonna be a thing. And the New York Times for me feels like a little bit like relief. Which, by the way, I would like to discuss, because all I ever wanted, like growing up in my early 20s was just, I would always say I want one book on one bookshelf in one bookstore. That's what I wanted. I wanted one book. Then I was like, I want to be a New York Times bestseller. Now I like feel relief when I hit the list. I don't even necessarily feel joy. So that we could talk about that separately. But
step into my office, Rebecca.
Right, exactly. But I think like number one, the lists are so unbelievably, they're just so competitive now, which is great. I try to reframe that. I'm like, how amazing that publishing is thriving. And it really is. Like TikTok, like people are coming to books, people are reading. Like the amount of books that are being sold in those top like 5, 8, 10 slots in the New York Times list, it's astounding. It's like hundreds of thousands of copies a week. Like that is a good thing for books. That is a good thing for the health of our industry. That being said, like, of course I want it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I don't want it. Every time, like, I want it. But also, like, I will say it was a really competitive moment when the One Italian Summer paperback came out. We didn't get on the list the first week. I think we did the second. And I was really devastated. And then, like, life moved on and people loved that book. Oh, well.
Yeah, it's crazy because like I used to be an indie songwriter, and there'd be times where like I'd write a song and it would be on Grey's Anatomy or something, but nobody knew it. Right. And I'm like, yeah, because it's not going to be in the algorithm of like a top 40. It's just like a song on a record that I wrote that a music supervisor heard, And so if you don't hit the list, even if it's a good book, it's not suggested to anybody. And so the books that we wind up seeing, some of them are the best books, and some of them are just the books that had really good beginnings for whatever the reason. And then there's a lot of good books that like people don't necessarily find, but there's some books that hit the list like way later.
And I think we were texting about that, because I think that for me, yes, the list is nice. The far more important thing is that a book, quote unquote, sticks, that it keeps selling.
Yeah.
That like you tell, your friend, and then your friend tells her sister, and then her sister tells her, and that like people keep enjoying it and keep reading it, and it has a long life. Like that's what I want for my books more than anything. And by the way, like that's healthy business. At the end of the day, when Simon Schuster is like looking at, the portfolio to see like, are they going to offer me for my next book? How much money are they going to give me? Blah, blah, blah. They're not looking at whether or not I hit the New York Times list. They're looking at like, what are the sales? How many books did she sell? That's what matters. And so I think a lot of times you have like, these press hits for something, and something will kind of like pop off for 1 week and then it will fall. Big deal.
Exactly. Same thing in the podcast industry. We just had a meeting with Apple, and they're looking at like week after week, like what's your consistent draw, because that's what matters.
That's what matters.
Yeah. So if people are sitting in this room and they feel like they have a book inside of them, first of all, let's just do this one at a time. Raise your hand if you think it's like more of a nonfiction book.
Oh, that's you.
Okay. Raise your hand if you think it's a fiction book. Okay, so there's definitely some. So for those who are setting out to write an awesome piece of fiction, what would be just one piece of guidance? There's probably so many.
I would say try, when you're like actively in the book, I would say set a word count goal for yourself every day. Like have it be 500 words, maybe 1,000. Honestly, maybe it's 250. You're working full time, you have kids, there's other things going on. Maybe it's 250, but just tell yourself you have to hit that every single day and do it without fail until the book is completed. Because you don't have to get it right, you just have to get it written. The hardest part about fiction is just getting it down, like getting one completed manuscript down. You can worry about whether it's good or not later, I think like getting through that first draft is really, really key. It also feels very Herculean. It feels very obtuse. Is that the right word?
Sure.
Obtuse.
Go with obtuse.
Okay.
Fine.
It feels very obtuse. It's like, can I really write a book? Can I write a novel? Yes, you can. You just have to break it up in small word counts every single day and keep writing until it's finished. Honestly, if you write 500, I can't do math right now. I'm pivoting. I was going to try to break it down for you. If you wrote 500 words a day, you could finish 60,000
Rebecca, don't
words.
do that to yourself.
I can't do it.
You'll never survive it.
Everybody has phones and calculators.
Can't do math.
So just stick with a word count, and maybe you give yourself Sunday off, but really like write through. It is so much easier to finish a novel if you don't step out of sync with it. If you just like stay in it. And then once it's finished, you can have, people always think that they need other authors or other writers to read their work. No, you just need to have a reader read your work. Like if you are a reader, you can tell whether something is working or not, whether a storyline is compelling or not. You don't need to be a writer to have good reader instincts. So just find some friends who are good readers and have them peer review it.
You think it's important to write from life? Like, I feel like that's something people say all the time, like take stuff from your own life.
Yeah, because it's going to feel impactful. I don't think that the storyline has to be from life, but I think it's very helpful if the emotions are, for sure. And also, like, what's the point of writing if it isn't excavating some of that anyway? I think that, like, I also think that there are like a million different plots, but there are really only probably 3 different stories, and we've all experienced them.
What are those 3? Boy meets girl, boy loses girl.
Yeah, but no, more I mean like love story, grief story, like more I mean like the emotion of these things. And so I think like even if you're writing about some, where did you say that editor was from? Siberia.
Oh my God, I can't remember what I said.
Even if you're writing about something in Siberia, if it's a story about love, if it's a story about grief, like you experience that. We're human beings. You tap into that. Because that's what makes a book resonate. I think like when you can put something down on the page that makes me and Cathy read it and say like, yes, like you're naming something that we felt, that's what makes a book sing. That's what makes people want to read it, want to pass it on, want to talk about it.
Yeah, that's true. Are you allowed to say, don't answer if you can't say, are you allowed to say if any of your newer books are being turned into movies?
Yeah, they all are. But
oh my God, I love that.
To say, like,
rolls off your tongue. Yeah, all of them.
But I have to say that, like, my friend Michael Robert, who's a wonderful screenwriter, he wrote 500 Days of Summer and like all the John Green movies, and he did Daisy Jones. And anyway, he's great. But he always likes to say to me, it's a happy coincidence when films get made, and it is really true. So it's like, yes, there's a plan for all of them, but like movies are like giant old airplanes, and like a piece breaks, and in the time it takes to like source and find that piece, like another piece breaks. So like the odds of it all working at the same time and getting off the ground. And I don't mean that to be cynical, because I don't feel cynical at all about my career. I don't have a lot of attachment to that element of my career. It's not where I derive a lot of meaning.
I get that.
So it's nice, and it would be nice to expand my audience, but the thing that I really care about is the novels and the
Right.
writing.
And have there been examples of the movie version being as good as the book? Like, I can't think of many.
I don't know. Harry Potter was pretty good.
Misery is so good. Misery.
Yeah, there are some.
Yeah. But I remember when like Eat, Pray, Love came out.
Yeah.
And we all wanted to love the movie.
Yeah.
And we're like, ah.
But by the way, I just want to say,
she's like, beautiful, but like 4 hours.
I recently rewatched that. It was kind of fun.
The movie?
Yeah. It was kind of fun.
I don't think you're allowed to say this, so you can just skip this question. But if you got to choose who played the lead in One Italian Summer, what actress would you play?
You know what's interesting? Like I don't know, because I don't I have this friend. She used to be an agent. She's not anymore, but she's my first reader. She's been my first reader on every single one of my books. And every single time she reads one of my novels, her first note is like, what does she look like? What does anybody look like? Because I am not a visual writer in that way. Like, I don't write with an image. Like, I know who the characters are in here. Like, I feel them. I feel who they are. I don't necessarily know what they look like. And so I'll add something in, and you know, that's what they look like. But I don't, like, when it comes to a visual medium, I don't have a lot of attachment to it. I think One Italian Summer would and will be so fun to see, because it's Positano, it's Italy, it's sexy, it's romantic, it's all those things. But in terms of the characters, I don't really have a vision necessarily. Well, yeah, I always think readers are better equipped to answer that question. Who do you see?
I don't know. Like, I feel like I've read all your books. I feel like Jennifer Goodwin can be in one of them.
Yeah.
Like, we'll give her one role. And
I always think in 5 years,
Zoe Deschanel will have another part. But it's like that cute, smart, and good-looking girl. Yeah. That's the girl.
I like
you guys, how awesome is Rebecca Serle?
You guys are awesome. How awesome is Cathy? I could talk all day with you.
I mean, raise your hand if you've read any of her books. Okay, so I'm so excited for the rest of you, because you get to go home and like devour a book. Like, I'm a hard sell, like, not to put things down, but like my friends were like, oh, I'm like, what's my next book I'm supposed to read? Because they were all done with yours. And they're like, read Lessons in Chemistry. And I was okay. Like, I wasn't like all into it. And I won't say who, I don't want to out them, but a few of my friends were like, I agree with you. They were like, I felt like that book was like overhyped. These books, I'm just telling you, they're not overhyped. You're going to be obsessed. And then you're going to tell all of your friends, like, you need this book. You need this book. You're welcome. You need this book. So maybe in the airport home, you'll go get one of her books. Or if you get the VIP bag, you'll get a signed copy of her book and mine, and you'll take it with you. Tell everybody where they can find you and follow along.
You can find me, RebeccaSerle.com is my website. Rebecca Serle is my Instagram. I'm mostly on Instagram. I'm not really on Twitter X. I'm not on that anymore.
I also don't have it. I also don't have TikTok. I'm so behind.
I know. I'm on TikTok, but mostly it's Instagram, and that's where you can find if I'm, you know, whenever my next book tour comes up, if I'm coming to a city where any of you live, or I'm doing events here and you live here. There's news about like where to purchase my new books, what my new books are going to be, all of that kind of stuff. So follow me there.
So exciting.
Thank you, Cathy.
You're the best.
You're the best.
All right.
This is so nice.
Don't move. We'll take a picture.
Oh, we're taking a picture. This is so fun. Oh, we have to take a picture, Libby. She's sitting here with glasses. Okay.
Oh, they're really cute.
I know. I took them off.
I know. It's like really. Wait, let's send this to Libby.
Okay, we're gonna take a picture
in real time. I'll send it to her. Okay. Wait. You know what? Stand this way, because
okay.
it's like
the lights here. And then she can see all of you.
She can see all of you. Wave to Libby.